Settle down. Senate Leader.
Point of order. On the need to include Pan-Africanism in Nigerian security.
On the foregoing, the total recurrent expenditure requirement is 166 billion.
I have a petition here from one of my constituents.
Exactly a week ago, senators received a letter from President Muhammadu Buhari requesting approval to borrow the sum of $29.9 billion to execute key infrastructural projects across the country between 2016 and 2018. In the letter, President Buhari had explained that the external borrowing plan would be targeted at projects which cut across all sectors, with special emphasis on infrastructure, agriculture, health, education, water supply, growth, and employment generation. At the resumption of plenary this week, the Senate leader, Senator Alun Dume, moved a motion for the consideration of the request, and it was subsequently seconded.
Mr. President, with your permission, I wish to move that the request be referred to the relevant committee for further legislative action. I so move.
Senate President Bukola Saraki then puts the motion to a vote.
Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. Let me put the question again. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. Nays have it.
With that ruling, the motion was defeated. Speaking afterwards, the majority leader explains why the lawmakers voted against considering the president's request.
The presentation from Mr. President was not complete. There wasn't an attachment that is required for consideration. So we felt that taking it to the committee level without members, citing the details of the borrowing plans. The details of the borrowing plan is absent. That is one of the major reasons.
The Senate leader has promised to meet with the relevant members of the executive to discuss the details and do a proper presentation to the Senate at a later date. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is yet to consider the president's request. The House had earlier called off the consideration, which was to take place on Thursday last week. There are indications that it may not be considered this week as well.
That's a key focus today on the program. We're joined by Adetilewa Adebajo, who is an economist. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, Suleiman.
Good morning. Well, we've seen the reason why this was rejected, but I heard a lot of other people say, look, this speaks volumes. Does this to you?
Well, it's a bit too early to say what's really going on, because this is now the political side of this whole equation. But I think it's important to put into perspective where we are today. Currently, the debt profile for Nigeria is $61 billion. If we take this 30 billion to it, we'll take our debt stock to $90 billion. The question is that sustainable? The breakdown of the 61 billion shows that $11 billion is external debt for both the federal government and state governments. The state governments have $12 billion outstanding in their debt, and the federal government has, in terms of domestic debt, and in terms of domestic debt for the federal government, you have another $37 billion. So that's pretty significant as to how we're going to manage this debt going forward. So really, that's really where the issues are.
Do you then think we need this loan?
Do we need the loan? Yes, we need the loan. But the question is, what type of loan are we getting, and can we really pay back this money? The last time I was on this program, you remember I was in favor of getting an IMF loan. And the reason why I mentioned the IMF loan was the discipline that is involved. If you take a look at the breakdown of this loan, some of it is very vague. 1.2 billion for agriculture, one for this, one for that. It's very opaque at this stage. We don't really know those details. There are clear projects that have been defined for the Mambila project, which is taking about $5 billion. We're looking at some railway projects that they're also considering to be able to borrow against these projects. So these are the things that we need to look. But having said that, the fact is that are we really, or is the government really looking to attract private capital? Are these projects bankable that can be done by private sector or foreign direct investment financing? That is the consideration we need to look at.
Now, from what you've seen, what do you think?
Well, I'm not quite sure how many of these projects are bankable. One of my main concerns is the fact that the government has still not inaugurated the National Council on Privatization. And the discussion on the concession planning is very vague. For instance, we've been told that General Electric is going to be given the concession for some of the railways. General Electric does not operate railways. What they do is they produce locomotives. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to work and who's going to operate those railways and the process.
5 years.
Exactly. So we need to look at the details, and the concessioning plan for the government to be able to attract private capital is something that we need to see. So in the absence of private capital, have we tried it? So why do we want to go for this? If these projects are bankable, then let the private sector handle it.
I thought it was part of what was said yesterday by the DG of the DMO, saying that, look, it's cheaper to borrow externally than locally. I think at 7% or thereabouts.
Definitely, and some of these loans from the IMF and World Bank is at 0%. So but the discipline and the analysis that will go through the project from the IMF or the World Bank is really what we need. So we have that thorough analysis and the discipline to look at these projects and see what we need to do. The problem I have is not the borrowing, is